It started with thunder. Marrow Creek was used to storms, the kind that rolled across the plains without warning, flattening wheat fields and shaking windows. But this one was different. The night it hit, every light in town went out at once. The air had that strange, charged silence that comes right before everything breaks. Then came the rain, walls of it, followed by the wind. By midnight, half the roads were underwater. Power lines fell. Trees snapped like matchsticks. Sheriff Dean Harper was running on caffeine and static, juggling rescue calls from all over the county. To him, it was just another bad night in tornado country, until the call came in from Old County Road 9. A farmer named Ben Latham said half his field had caved in. Claimed it wasn't flooding, said the earth just dropped. When the sun came up, Harper drove out there himself. The storm had peeled back the topsoil, leaving a crater the size of a pickup. In the center was a concrete slab. Embedded in it, a metal hatch, half exposed, like something pulled from under the ground. Harper crouched beside it. No markings, no hinges, no rust. It shouldn't have been there. The Latham family had owned that property for 3 generations, and there were no records of any shelter or storage pit. The hatch was flush with the soil, the concrete poured clean and smooth, industrial, not farm-made. Harper called it in. By noon, the volunteer fire department and a small team from the state rescue office arrived. One of them was Evan Brooks, a 34-year-old diver and part-time contractor. He was the first to notice the detail that made everyone go quiet. The hatch wasn't sealed by mud or storm debris. It had been locked from the outside. Marrow Creek wasn't the kind of place that made the news. A single main street, 2 diners, and a population of 1,200. Everyone knew everyone. That's what made the discovery so unsettling. Lily Rowe, who ran the morning show on KMCX radio, broke the story the next day. Sheriff's office confirms discovery of an underground shelter on private farmland outside Marrow Creek, she said into the mic, her voice steady. Officials believe it was uncovered during last night's storm. Within hours, photos surfaced, grainy shots of the hatch surrounded by mud and curious onlookers. The clip went viral across the region. Storm Shelter Mystery, the headlines read. By the second day, reporters showed up. Among them was Carla Mendez, an investigative journalist for the Chronicle. She'd covered everything from mining collapses to missing persons cases. What drew her wasn't the shelter itself, but what the sheriff reportedly found inside. Because by then, the hatch had been opened. The rescue team worked for hours cutting through the rusted bolts that sealed the hatch. When it finally lifted, the smell that rose up was unmistakable. Earth, rust, and something else. Something old. Evan Brooks was the first to go down. The ladder led about 15 feet underground. At the bottom was a narrow corridor, concrete walls and a metal door. The storm had knocked loose some of the soil, but the space beyond was dry, perfectly preserved. Inside was a small room. No windows, just a single table and 2 chairs. On the table, a lantern still upright. Beside it, a row of glass jars sealed with wax. The jars contained small objects, buttons, rings, folded notes, and one jar near the back held what looked like a cassette tape, wrapped carefully in cloth. When Harper and the forensic techs arrived, Brooks was standing by the table, staring at the jars like he was afraid to touch them. The first note they unrolled was brittle and damp, but legible. It read, "If this is found, I was right. They were here. The ground speaks when it rains." The signature was faint. Only one word could be read clearly. Barlow. When Sheriff Harper heard that name, he froze. Henry Barlow. He'd heard the story once as a rookie, about a man from the next county over who vanished decades ago after a flash flood. Locals remembered him as a teacher, a quiet man. There'd been talk of strange happenings around his property, whispers about voices during storms, nothing ever proven. But the dates didn't match. Barlow had died in 1982. And this shelter, according to state construction records, hadn't existed before 1994. Still, there it was, his name, written on parchment, preserved under glass. For Harper, it was no longer just about the storm. By the end of the week, Marrow Creek was buzzing. At the diner on Main Street, the regulars swapped stories like wildfire. One swore they'd seen a man standing in the Latham field during the storm. Long coat, hat brim pulled low, staring at the ground. Another said their radio had gone haywire that night, picking up voices between static. Grace Nolan, a retired teacher who'd lived in town her whole life, came forward a few days later. She'd been listening to Lily's radio segment when she heard the name Barlow. She drove straight to the sheriff's office. "I remember him," she said. "He used to come through Marrow Creek once a week. Said he was mapping water tables. Always polite. Always alone." Harper showed her a photo pulled from the old case file. Barlow, mid-40s, thinning hair, wireframe glasses. Grace nodded. "That's him." Then she added something that sent chills through the room. "He used to ask about the old tornado shelters the town built after the '73 twister. Said he wanted to know which ones had been sealed shut." The forensic team began cataloging everything in the shelter. There were 12 jars total. 9 held small personal items, 2 held letters wrapped in wax paper, and the last one, the one with the tape, was labeled in black ink, "Marrow Creek, night of the storm." But the date didn't make sense. July 18, 1992. That was 2 years before the shelter had supposedly been built. The tape was sent to the state lab. Technicians cleaned it and played it back. The audio was faint, degraded, but enough came through to stop the room cold. A man's voice, calm, uneven, Barlow's. "The children are gone. The lights have gone out again. If anyone hears this, the ground has started to hum. It's underneath us now." Then static, then, faintly, another sound. A woman crying. The recording ended abruptly. When Harper heard it, he asked the technician to replay the last 10 seconds, over and over, until they realized the crying wasn't one voice. It was several. Dozens. Layered together, distorted by distance. Carla Mendez stayed in Marrow Creek for weeks, turning the storm shelter discovery into a full investigation. She pulled county blueprints, interviewed neighbors, and traced the Latham property back to the 1940s. What she found was even stranger. The concrete used in the shelter didn't match local supply. The composition was military grade, the kind used for fallout bunkers. But there had never been any registered military site near Marrow Creek. A retired surveyor named Cal Briggs, now in his 80s, offered the first clue. He told Carla that in the early 90s he'd been hired to draw plans for private emergency storage on farmland outside town. The man who hired him? Name was Barlow, he said. He paid in cash, wanted it quiet. When shown the photo, Briggs nodded without hesitation. After a week of controlled excavation around the shelter, ground-penetrating radar revealed a secondary void. A chamber deeper underground, a small crawl space leading to another sealed door. Harper's team opened it carefully. Inside, they found what appeared to be another room, smaller, almost like a cell. The walls were covered in chalk marks, dates, names, some crossed out, some not. In the corner, a pile of rusted metal and splintered wood, and among it, something that made Harper step back. A child's shoe, perfectly preserved in the dry air. The forensics team marked it as evidence. Soil analysis confirmed it had been there for decades, long before the shelter's recorded construction date. By this point, Harper had seen enough to know something wasn't adding up. The shelter couldn't belong to Barlow, but everything inside said otherwise. Then came another storm. It hit 10 days later, smaller but just as violent. The site was tarped and roped off, but the rain came faster than they could drain it. Lily Rowe, broadcasting from her studio on Main Street, reported the rising winds. Then, mid-segment, her live mic caught something strange, a low, vibrating hum. She thought it was feedback, until listeners began calling in, saying they heard the same sound outside. It wasn't thunder, it was the ground. Back at the site, Harper and Brooks stood under floodlights as the rain turned the soil to sludge. Then they heard it too, a deep, rhythmic pulse coming from beneath the concrete, like pressure or machinery. But the lab had already confirmed, no power lines, no metal conduits, nothing mechanical. The sound was coming from inside the earth itself. When the storm passed, part of the lower chamber had collapsed. The following morning, rescue crews digging to stabilize the structure uncovered a metal crate buried under the second room. Inside it, files, dozens of them, all sealed in wax. Each file contained old-school records, attendance sheets, handwritten notes, and clipped news articles about missing children, most dating between 1979 and 1984. At the bottom of the crate was one final note. The shelters weren't for storms, they were for keeping them here. The water doesn't hide them, it brings them back. The signature again read, Barlow. When the sheriff's office cross-referenced the names in the files, 3 matched open missing persons cases from nearby counties. All had vanished during summer floods. None had ever been found. The Marrow Creek shelter was sealed again by order of the state. The land remains fenced off, monitored for sinkholes. Officially, the case is classified as undetermined historical anomaly. But for the people of Marrow Creek, the storm changed everything. Grace Nolan stopped walking near County Road 9. Lily Rowe transferred to a bigger station 2 towns away, said she couldn't stand broadcasting during rain anymore. Evan Brooks moved out of state. He told a colleague he still hears the hum sometimes when he's near water. Carla Mendez published her story. The final line read, Some storms pass, others dig. Sheriff Harper retired the following spring. In his last interview, when asked what he thought the shelter really was, he paused for a long time before answering. I don't think it was a shelter, he said. I think it was a door someone tried to bury, and the storm just opened it again. No one rebuilt on that field. Grass grows over the crater now. The wind hums across it every time the air turns heavy. And on nights when the thunder rolls low and far, locals swear they hear it again, a faint knocking beneath the soil, like something waiting. They thought it was just a storm. But sometimes what the storm uncovers isn't wreckage. It's memory. It's guilt. It's everything we thought the ground had forgotten. Because sometimes the ground doesn't just bury secrets. It remembers them.